Welcome everyone today, and I am delighted to be hosting this afternoon with Dr. Lou Atkinson, who is a behavioural scientist, exercise professional with over 16 years experience of conducting applied health research, 25 years of practice in health and fitness industry as a trainer, educator and a consultant. She's passionate about bringing together the worlds of health and fitness to reduce disease burden and address health inequalities. Her research and practice is focused on understanding the challenges to sustaining healthy lifestyle behaviour and developing tools and programmes to support as many people as possible to make healthy lifestyle changes. Lou has designed and evaluated and personally delivered one-to-one and group-based behaviour change programmes for individuals living with long-term conditions, including obesity, cancer, diabetes and depression. On top of that, she's also an advocate for maternal health and physical activity as an expert scientific advisor for maternal and child health charities. She's also advised on professional standards for exercise instructors and health coaches. And if that isn't enough, she is also the head of research at EXI. And I'm delighted to introduce her today. And we're going to be talking about how to introduce physical activity into your lifestyle and hopefully embed it as something that you do day on day, week on week, year on year. So Lou, thanks so much for joining us today. And I'll pass it over to you for a brief introduction.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. So just to explain, my role at EXI is to make sure that we are always evidence-based. So to both use the evidence that already exists in the world. We have a huge amount of evidence that demonstrates the benefits of physical activity for improving health and managing long-term conditions, and also to contribute to that evidence base. So with our own research. And I also advise on the behaviour change side of our platform, making sure that we are using all of the tools and techniques we can to help all of our users be successful.
Amazing. And I think, as part of EXI, we've been designed specifically to focus on physical activity. We are very passionate about working with other organizations, the likes that you've worked with over the years, where, organizations are delivering weight management, diabetes prevention, structured education, and where programs are incredibly good at delivering the dietetic side of these interventions and behavior change. We at EXI have decided to focus solely on physical activity. And the reason we've done that is it seems to be not just a UK thing, not just a Europe thing. This is a global issue that we're seeing, which brings me to my first question is, why do so many people find it difficult to become physically active and maintain that as part of their lifestyle?
Yeah, it's a great place to start, Louise. So I think what we see consistently in the research, and if you're a practitioner and you're working with individuals who want to get more active, you'll see this on a day-to-day basis, which is that the vast majority of individuals really do understand the link between physical activity and health. They do understand that there are a lot of benefits for their physical and mental health to including physical activity on a regular basis into their lifestyle. So actually, it isn't necessarily about knowing that it's a beneficial thing to do. It's more about some of the challenges that they face in taking that action, and sustaining that as a long-term habit. And really, this falls into three key areas. So the first one are practical reasons. So we're all going to struggle from time to time, or sometimes for a long period of time, to find the time for physical activity and exercise. We might also not have the financial resources. So if we have to pay for, whether it's accessing physical activity services like an exercise class or a gym, for example, or it might be about having the resources to pay for childcare, for example, or to get transport from where you are to where you need to be to participate in the type of activities that you like. And also, depending on where you live, what your circumstances are. You just might not have access to the right options for you. So if the only option you have or feel you have is to go to the gym, and that doesn't appeal to you, as it doesn't to most people, then that's a really practical barrier to including physical activity in your life. Then there are some physical reasons. So our physical ability to undertake physical activity is clearly very key. And what we find is a lot of people in today's world are living with chronic conditions, and that comes with symptoms that can include pain and discomfort, either when moving or sometimes that's constant, a lot of fatigue and feeling tired. We might not have the physical skills, so we might not be very steady on our feet. We might not have a lot of stamina. We might struggle with things like balance and coordination. And that applies to individuals, whether they have a chronic condition or maybe they just haven't engaged in lots of activity in recent years, and so they've become deconditioned. And those are really tangible factors that put us off from being active. If when we move, it's uncomfortable, it's painful, it makes us feel more tired, or we just feel that we're not very good at it, these are all demotivators and genuine barriers. And then the last area I would highlight is more of the psychological and social factors. So if you have a chronic condition, for example, there's a very genuine concern that being active might make you even more unwell. So, for example, if you have a heart condition or if you have pain in your joints from arthritis or fibromyalgia, conditions like this, we might worry that undertaking physical activity is going to make us feel worse. There's also our past experiences have a really big influence on how we feel about certain behaviours. And with physical activity, lots of people report having negative experiences in the past. And that can range from, maybe being picked on when you were doing school sports or team sports, or maybe, being bullied or just not feeling that you're very good at those types of activities. It might also be that you have encountered discrimination or stigma. So, particularly, we see that in people who are living in bigger bodies and feel really genuinely uncomfortable and have been made to feel uncomfortable in traditional physical activity type spaces. Um, we also might find that individuals might know about the general health benefits and might be quite motivated towards being physically active, may not know how exactly to go about doing that. How do we start making sure that we stay safe, and how do we know that what we're doing is going to be effective? So we need to offer people the right knowledge and information in order for them to be able to do that. And the last factor is really around our social world. So we know that people who grow up and live amongst people for whom physical activity is a normal part of their life, they're much more likely to grow up to be physically active regularly themselves, and vice versa. So if our immediate sort of social circle are not people we see being active, who don't talk about the valuing physical activity, then we're less likely to engage in it ourselves. So there are lots and lots of really genuine reasons why people will find it difficult. And what's unhelpful often is the perception that this is just some kind of lack of willpower. Clearly, there are genuine, multifaceted barriers to being physically active, and that's why we're here to help.
Amazing. And I think when you go through the list, people often feel like they have to make excuses for why they're not active. There are genuine reasons why we are in this situation and why it is not second nature to so many people. And one of the things that we come up a lot at EXI is the perception that people have is you either play, formal sport, so that's how you become physically active, or you go to the gym and you do an hour class, or you stay in the gym for an hour. And what we're really hoping as part of the EXI team is to get people to understand that, first, find something that you like to do and enjoy, but secondly, move away from the narrative that if it's not an hour, it doesn't count, or if it's not, within the four walls of a facility, it doesn't count. And I think one of the things that we really like to focus on the EXI side is what works for you, how can we find that, And I know, in the world that you've been working in over the last kind of 20 plus years, you have to have some, hints, tips, recommendations that can make this easier. And if anyone, for anyone listening, that they can come away with something really practical from this session.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more, Louise, around that narrative. I think for decades now, we've been fed these messages around no pain, no gain, and no excuses. And actually, as we've just discussed, there are lots and lots of really genuine reasons why somebody might not have physical activity as part of their life. And if you are living with pain or you're worried about causing pain, then those types of messages are really unhelpful. Actually, the people we know for whom physical activity is really important and is integrated into their lifestyle, when we ask them the reasons why, they talk about the fact that it brings them joy, it makes them feel good. So that's completely in opposition to those sorts of no pain, no gain type messages. So I completely agree. I think also we've been fed a narrative around aesthetics that's really unhelpful as well. And I know there is a growing movement away from that in terms of really trying to advocate for the benefits of physical activity for your mental well-being, for your overall life and health, and removing that from that aesthetic of being beach ready or having to attain a sort of certain physique, and being again considered to have failed if you don't achieve that sort of really unattainable type of aesthetic. So I think in terms of practical steps that individuals can take, I absolutely agree that we want to think about how physical activity can be something that isn't that traditional perception of, structured uh, exercise or team sports or individual sports. So it's important to remember that physical activity includes what we think about as activities of daily living. So that's things like walking, doing the housework, playing games with your children or grandchildren, going about your daily chores, shopping, work-based activities as well. And so often a first step for someone who wants to get more physically active is to think about those activities they do every day and see if they can make those just a little bit more physically challenging. So at EXI, we always guide people around intensity. We often start people on a prescription of low intensity to make sure it's safe and it's achievable. And so low intensity is something that just makes you feel a little bit more breathless. So you're breathing a little bit deeper, but you can still hold that conversation and feel quite comfortable. And then our moderate intensity is where we start to feel a bit more breathless, a bit warmer. We can feel our heart beating a bit faster, but again, we're still able to sort of speak in sentences. And so if we think about those day-to-day activities, for example, we can think about, well, if it normally takes us 5 minutes to walk to the corner shop for a pint of milk, could we try and do it in 4 minutes, for example, because that's just going to push that physical activity up a little bit. We can think about, again, if we're playing with children, how can we make that a little bit more active for us as well as for the kids? Kids love to run around, it's in their nature, so maybe we can start to join in with some of that. And some of the things I like to do as well is think about, where are my few minutes in the day that occur maybe more than once a day, and could we build some physical activity into that? So for example, when we make a cup of tea or coffee, while we're waiting for the kettle to boil, we could do a few squats, we could do a few bicep curls with some tins in the kitchen. Or for example, when we're if we're at work, if we're doing a video call like I am today, then we can stand up and we can move around a little bit. So just enough to get our heart rate up and make us that little bit more active. So the first tip is always have a think about what you do regularly anyway, and can you make that a little bit more active?
Amazing. And I think, I'm never going to become more physically active doing housework personally. But it's definitely that hinging an activity to something that you do regularly. I think that's a really powerful one, and it's easy. Because I think one of the other things that that we talk about with a lot of our XE users, and that I've spoken to, over the last 20 plus years, is that all or nothing mentality. So are 10 squats while the kettle is boiling beneficial, or going up and down the stairs once or twice throughout the day, or whatever you choose to do, is that as beneficial as then doing something completely structured for a certain amount of time?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got, again, an increasing amount of evidence that demonstrates that any activity at all, no matter how small, does make a difference. And actually, what we see as well in big, large studies is that the benefits are the biggest for the people who are the least active. So actually, if you're thinking, well, actually, I've really struggled recently to do really anything at all, how much difference will a few minutes a day make? It really will make a huge difference to your health, much more proportionately beneficial than someone, for example, who is already doing maybe 150 minutes of activity a week and they add an extra 10 minutes onto that. Of course, that's great, but the proportionate benefit to the less active individual is huge. And we've also got evidence now around what's being termed exercise snacks or activity snacks, which is exactly what you've described, Louise, which is just doing those, maybe even a minute, maybe just 10 repetitions of a particular exercise, because all of that accumulates during the day. And if we can start by, as you say, identifying those areas where we can just add even 1 minute of exercise or activity into our day, but we're doing that multiple times a day, we will soon start to build up that additional stamina, those physical skills, and we'll be able to progress from there to adding a few extra minutes as we progress through the weeks and months.
Amazing. And I think you've touched on it a couple of times, but there really is a shift to bring the mindset from exercise to physical activity. And, we're really trying to embrace that physical activity is all day activity, doing anything you want. Is there one message that you would have for people, trying to move out of that exercise mindset into the physical activity world?
Yeah, definitely. I think, as you know, one of our key messages at XE is anything is everything, because it really does make that difference. And I think something that can really help with that is when you're using a wearable activity tracker. And it doesn't have to be expensive, it doesn't have to be complicated, but that can be really, really enlightening to show you what difference those small changes can make in terms of accumulating that physical activity, whether you're measuring it in steps. So again, we've got really good evidence that shows that just increasing your daily steps by 500 steps a day really significantly reduces your risk of becoming seriously ill with things like cardiovascular disease. And an activity tracker can help you to track that. If it has heart rate monitoring on it, even better, because we can actually start to see the effect on your heart of doing those small amounts of activity. And because those trackers will track anything, even incidental activity, you start to understand that actually just making your daily life a little bit more active is what makes the difference, because that's sustainable. If you don't enjoy structured exercise or you don't enjoy sports, and not everybody does, I didn't do any kind of structured exercise or sports that I enjoyed until I was 19. I wasn't a sporty person at all, and I just found my place and I found my way of doing it, and I've been able to sustain it since then. And even though now my fitness is much higher than it was when I was a teenager, I still have no inclination to return to badminton or netball or any of the other sports that I was forced to play at school. So I think being aware of how active you can be during the day just by making those small changes is a really good tip.
Amazing. And I've got two more questions for you. The second last one I have is, there's a tendency for, the population in general to start off badly on a Monday and wait for next Monday, or wait until September or January. And, the tips that we've spoken about are adding in little bits of activity into your day so it doesn't feel like a mountain that has to be achieved, every single week. And it's just, I'd love to get your thoughts on, that weighting and those different peaks that we have throughout the year that either align with school holidays or an event, or, as I said, just Monday. So there's a lot that you can do between a Thursday and Sunday, without feeling that you've failed. And it's that guilt and that failure that people attach with, I'm going to wait until then, and it's what happens in that interim, um, is quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think often when we set ourselves a sort of a target, for example, as you say, we might say, right, okay, I've got a wedding coming up and I want to, feel that I look good at the wedding, or I've got a holiday coming up, or I've got a doctor's appointment coming up. And we use these kind of external motivators to get us going and doing physical activity. The problem with that is then when we reach that particular event, often that motivation dissipates. Or, as you say, we start making an attempt towards that change. And if it doesn't go smoothly, if something gets in the way, as it often will, we get that terrible sense of failure and guilt. And those are some of those negative past experiences that influence the likelihood that we will try again in the future. So what we talk about often with our EXI users is being really comfortable with the idea that this isn't going to be a smooth journey. As we've already talked about right at the top of this, there are lots of really genuine, real life reasons why physical activity isn't going to be our top priority every single day and every single week and every single month. So sort of being prepared for the fact that there are going to be setbacks and there are going to be times when it's going to be less easy for you. And because of that, once we get into that mindset of saying, well, actually, it's just about doing as much as I can, when the circumstances are right, that then we can just say, right, today's the day, because today I have 10 minutes in my day when I could go for a little brisk walk around the block, or I could watch a workout video at home and join in with it, or I can get the Hoover out and go hell for leather with the Hoover, because that's a much more sustainable approach than trying to set ourselves some unrealistic targets around, I'm going to do this type of exercise for this long, this many times a week, and it doesn't start at a level that's achievable. And even when we start to get into that groove and get into that habit, it's really important that we don't beat ourselves up when life gets in the way. Life is unpredictable. Things can happen, and that doesn't mean that your journey has ended. All that means is it's a little bump in the road. And when that happens, it's important to say, okay, I'm not going to be doing as much as I was doing last week because work is stressful, or I've got some family I need to take care of. But what can I do? What's achievable? Just enough to keep it in the forefront of your mind, and then really reflect on, when you've done a bit of activity, how does that make you feel? Because when life is stressful and busy, course, it's a natural inclination to take that time to go and do something else. But actually, we know that people will consistently say that just that small amount of activity gives them clarity of thinking, helps to reduce the sensation of feeling anxious or overwhelmed or worried or whatever it is they're experiencing. And of course, from a purely physical point of view, we cope better with stress when we are physically fit. So those small amounts of activity add up to make us physically and mentally more resilient to when life throws challenges our way.
Couldn't agree more. And I'm going to end with one where, as two members of the EXI team, we are incredibly passionate about physical activity, but also about creating a technology that doesn't exist, to our knowledge, anywhere else globally. And if you'd one message for our EXI users who are starting their journey, how can technology support, because we've designed Exi for the population who are not active, who need that guidance to get them, on the right track. And uh, we really are keen that users embrace technology and use it in a way that it guides and helps but doesn't take over. And I think that's where we're aiming for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. I know that the technology can be intimidating,
Hmm.
and can feel complicated. And as you say, for some people, it can become a bit all-consuming. So I think it's really important to have a sort of healthy relationship with the technology. So particularly when if you're a heavy smartphone user, you've got that phone on you all the time. If it's giving you that information about your physical activity levels, again, that can be something that can be a bit demotivating if you've had a bad few days, and you haven't been able to devote as much time as you would like. So again, having a little reset and saying, some days it's okay. Maybe what I need is a long hot bath, or maybe what I need is a snuggly evening on the sofa and a good film. Um, and with the wearable device as well, as I said earlier, it's super helpful for making us aware of, oh, actually, what activities in my life do count as physical activity, and are adding up to my sort of daily target. Uh, and using that as a prompt and as a motivator. So we often hear people say that they'll take a look in the evening, and if they haven't quite met their target, they might pop out for a quick walk or go up and down the stairs a few times. That's a really positive thing. That's what the technology is there for. It's there to help us understand if we're doing enough to benefit our health. But of course, if it's making us feel anxious, or if it's making us feel guilty, then maybe we need to take a break. And I think that's where the human beings can really help. So having a support system alongside the technology is really important. So we really advocate for being part of a community. We have our own Exi online community, which is really helpful. Lots of individuals sharing their experiences. So, I'm not the only one that's finding this difficult, or you might pick up some tips for how you can add an extra few minutes every day. But also the people around you. So some people like to have a buddy who maybe they'll go and be active together. They might go on a bike ride, or on a walk, or they might support each other to maybe go through the doors of a yoga class, or something that they would be too worried to do on their own. But often it's more just having like a cheerleader, I always say, someone who you can check in with and celebrate your successes and say, hey, I've done really well this week. But also someone who is going to reassure you that it's okay if it hasn't gone smoothly that week, because tomorrow is a new day, and you can start again. So the technology works best when we also have our cheer squad and our human support system around us as well.
Couldn't agree more. I'm going to finish on one final question, and that is, how do you like to stay physically active?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So, as I said, I just found my sort of my place and my vibe, in my sort of late teens, and it's changed over the years. But I have to say that I think what I've realised about what keeps me motivated is I enjoy activities where I have to think about what I'm doing. And potentially that's because I have, like a lot of people, have a busy job, have lots of different priorities, and so engaging in an activity where I have to really concentrate on what I'm doing, I think can be a really good way to give myself some different headspace. So that might include, for example, I have an indoor bike that I ride because I'm an indoor cycling instructor, and actually don't tell people, but I usually prefer being on my bike on my own and really concentrating on what I'm doing and enjoying the music. And I also enjoy yoga for that reason. I like the sort of fine details of yoga and really sort of concentrating on those poses and just making small adjustments. It really is something I have to focus on. And then last but not least, of course, is I live on the beautiful Isle of Portland in Dorset, and nothing makes me happier than walking around on the cliff tops, through the quarries, on the beach, being in the outdoors, being in the sunshine, being in nature. I think that's always going to be probably the activity that I'm going to engage with forever and ever.
Amazing. Lou, this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights. I think it's going to be incredibly helpful for all of our XE users. And I know we've created an infographic with your top tips that we'll share wider with the community. And I look forward to having more discussions around physical activity in the future.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I hope everyone's found it useful. And as ever, we're always open to any questions that anyone might have.
Fantastic. Thanks, Lou.